Should the Chargers trade for Brandon Aiyuk? Right now, the Chargers have like no wide receiver depth on this team. And with the uncertainty of Brandon Aiyuk's future with the 49ers, a lot of Chargers fans have been asking me if they should trade for him or even other star wide receivers like T. Higgins or Stephon Diggs before he was traded. Even Justin Jefferson, I don't really think he's going to be traded, but Brandon Aiyuk is the most likely to be traded. So make sure to like and subscribe if you do enjoy this content. It helps me out so much. And let's start off with Brandon Aiyuk as a player because he is a special player. He is a very good route runner. And let me just give you these stats right here because this might surprise you and how good he actually is. Just this past season, he was the second best receiver in terms of receiving grade and offensive grade from PFF. He only had 2 drops on 120 targets, which is a 2.3 drop percentage. Now, that is a very big deal for the Chargers because how many wide receivers did we see this past season? Even tight ends like Donald Parham, a lot of guys were dropping balls. Even Keenan Allen was dropping balls at times. Josh Palmer dropping balls. Obviously, Quentin Johnston dropped some balls, but really it was just about everybody. So if you get a guy like this who only has a 2.3 drop percentage, which is one of the best in the NFL, who also was one of the best receiving and offensive graded players in PFF, you are off to a great start right here. But also he was the 6th best in yards per route run, 23rd in contested catches. Remember, this guy is 6 foot. He's like 186 pounds, I think. Not the biggest wide receiver, but he has that positional versatility. You can play him in the slot. He was mostly played out wide with the 49ers, but they played him in the slot about 30 to 40% of the time last season. Now, the Chargers, obviously, we want a guy that can play out wide because we need that size. We want that athleticism. Brandon Aiyuk, he has both of those. He has the size at 6 feet and he has the athleticism. And he's not the best in contested catches, like he's 23rd best. And even though he's not the best in terms of contested catches, he would immediately be the best on our team in terms of that and in terms of route running, really in terms of any sort of category on this team. But he also has some yak ability. He had 12 missed tackles forced this past season. 70 of his catches last year went for a first down. And just to put that into perspective, because that is a huge number, Keenan Allen had 53 catches go for first down this last year, and that was his specialty. I mean, that was what he was known for. So with Brandon Aiyuk, you would basically be getting like an upgrade over Keenan Allen, and if you just go off of these stats, because he does everything that Keenan Allen can, but he's also better in the contested catch. He was just better overall graded by PFF. He's younger at 26 years old. He's also faster. Not as good of a route runner, but he has that positional versatility as well. You can play inside and on the outside, just like Keenan Allen was, and he's a first down machine. He also has that extra yak ability that Keenan Allen doesn't have. So why do I not want the Chargers to trade for that? It was not a formal request for a trade. So I am going to go off of what the agent says because, you know, he's the one that would tell him to request a trade from the team. I don't think that he has tried to force his way out yet. But that does not mean that he's not going to be traded just because he hasn't requested that trade yet. He's on the 5th year of his deal, which is that option after that 4-year rookie contract. And he's only going to be getting about $14 to $15 million this year, which is way underpaid. And he could sit out this season. There have been little talks about that. But also the Niners, if they want to extend him, they would have to pay him like $25 at least million a year. If you look at what Devontae Smith just got from the Eagles, I think it was 3 years for $75 million total. I mean, it's going to be along that framework. I think Brandon Aiyuk is a better wide receiver than Devontae Smith. I don't think it's really that close. So if the Niners don't want to pay that contract, which they might not want to, I mean, they got Deebo Samuel, they got Nick Bosa, they got a lot of guys that they got to pay. And specifically, Deebo Samuel might be the issue for the Niners. They probably don't want to pay 2 wide receivers a ton of money because Deebo Samuel got a $73.5 million contract over 3 years. Do they want to? Who would be interested in a trade? It's, you know, the Steelers, the Bills, the Ravens are interested. I even saw like the Patriots being floated around, but the main teams are the Steelers and the Bills. So if the Chargers wanted to trade for Brandon Aiyuk, there's competition out there. And I think the market is like a 2nd to a 3rd round pick. Plus, you would have to extend him to that big contract But if there's enough teams that are willing to pay a lot of money for him and a lot of compensation in terms of draft capital, it could be like a second round pick just straight up for Brandon Aiyuk. Then you have him on your team. Great job. You got a great wide receiver, but now you need to extend him immediately. He's not going to play on that $14 million contract. You need to rework that deal and add some years on top of it and extend him to probably something around like $28 million a season. And so if the Chargers do that, we would be losing a second round pick and we would be adding a 26-year-old wide receiver who is a very good wide receiver, probably one of the best in the NFL, not like that extreme top tier like Justin Jefferson, but certainly on that next level right below that. But you would also be paying a huge amount of money and a huge amount of your cap to a wide receiver when you just had two wide receivers in Keenan Allen and Mike Williams that you were not paying $28 million to, but close to that. And you just cut them and traded them off of your team so that you could take that same money and disperse it so that you could use that money to add depth at other positions because this team lacks depth. The reason for that is because we were paying big money to these guys at wide receiver. So would it improve this team in the short term? Yeah, I think it probably would. But I don't think the Chargers' philosophy right now, their roster management, the way that they want to construct this roster, I don't think that falls in line with trading for a big name wide receiver like Brandon Aiyuk, because even though it would improve this offense a lot, yes, Justin Herbert needs help. Yes, that wide receiver room is so really just not good right now. But that short-term gratification that we would get with Brandon Aiyuk, it would not be worth it in the long term because we'd be giving up that draft capital that we really value because Joe Hortiz can see talent at a high level, and then Jim Harbaugh and his coaching staff can develop talent at a high level. And on top of that, Ben Herbert, the strength and conditioning coach, can also develop guys and make them like stronger. You can make guys faster, quicker, more explosive, and make them less likely to be injured. You want to bring in your own guys rather than trade for a 26-year-old wide receiver for big money and big draft capital. You just want to bring your own guys in the draft, I think, especially at a premier position like that. Joe Hortiz, he wants to get younger at wide receiver. I think that's why both Mike Williams and Keenan Allen were gone and basically forced to take a pay cut or leave. But the biggest thing, I think, is that they just don't want to pay an absurd amount of money like that to a wide receiver, even though he does deserve it. They just want to disperse that money because just look at the tea leaves here. Jim Harbaugh values offensive line so highly, and Joe Hortiz has drafted first-round wide receivers a ton in the past. Why would they not just go out and get a first-round wide receiver or even a wide receiver on day two? Because you can still find some really good wide receivers in the second and the third round of the draft. I actually have a list right here of a bunch of good guys that you can get in the second and the third round. I mean, you don't need to get a guy like Brandon Aiyuk, who is already established in the NFL for big money and big draft capital, to have a good wide receiver on your team. Joe Hortiz wants to build this team with his own guys, and the better roster management strategy is to draft your own guy at the wide receiver position, whether that be at 5th overall with Malik Nabers or Marvin Harrison Jr. if he is there or not. But there are plenty of guys to have on day two. Like, listen to this: DK Metcalf, Amon-Ra St. Brown, George Pickens, T. Higgins, Michael Pittman Jr., Deebo Samuel, AJ Brown, Terry McLaurin, Cortland Sutton, Christian Kirk. I mean, like, I could keep going, but do you see what I mean? These are all wide receivers just in these past like 3 or 4 years that came out on day two of the draft. Just because you don't draft a first-round wide receiver, which we might not, I don't know, that doesn't mean that you're not going to get a wide receiver one that has that potential to be like Brandon Aiyuk. I mean, Brandon Aiyuk himself was a late first-round wide receiver. Pretty close to day two. So I don't want this trade to happen. I don't think it is going to happen. And I would rather have Joe Hortiz draft one of his own guys in round 2 or 3. And if it's in round 1, bring me Malik Nabers, bring me Marvin Harrison Jr. I'm all about it. But that is what I think of Brandon Aiyuk. Let me know what you guys think. Would you trade for him, give up like a second-round pick, and then pay him $28 million a year? You know, let me know what you think in the comments. But if you did not see my video yesterday, I did a big mock draft with a bunch of trades with the director